Hello everybody, we just finished watching the 9th episode of the Bleach 1000 Year Blood War arc of the anime, and being that we watched it, as normal, I have some thoughts to think about it with, and with that, I'd say let's get started with the episode. So, with housekeeping stuff, like I said, this is the 9th episode of the 1000 Year Blood War arc of the anime, episode number 375 overall, and then, of course, this episode is titled The Fall, right? Before we really get into it, I have to say that I think this is the worst episode that we have had of this arc so far, right? I think that all of them have been really good in building up, like, the suspense and mystery of DeQuincy and everything, and having, like, a thought-out episode of last time, and I just think this one really falls flat of what it wants to be, right? It's nothing here against the episode. They're basing off source material. It's what they could do, right? But I just feel like it really could be a bit more, and it being a bit more would have been better. But again, it's the source material. At this point in Bleach is when the source material, the manga, starts to go a little haywire, right? And this is really it just showing in the anime. It's not a problem. It's exactly what source material is, right? Normally I have the source material in the chapters, but looking at my paper, I think I forgot to write those down this time. So I don't have that this time, but I'm sure next time I can get it figured out. I know that episodes have normally been ranging about 5 to 4-ish chapters. So if I had to guess, this would probably be the same, but it may not be, right? But with all of that out of the way, I'd say that we should probably talk about the episode at large, right? Of course, last time, Ichigo was in the training sort of facility looking thing with our man Tanjiro, right? The healing guy of Squad Zero. And this time we actually don't start with this, right? We actually start with Shunsui in and now, right? We see that Shunsui has gotten a letter from the the Central 46 and the Soul King, right? And pretty much this letter says that he is to be the new head captain of the 13 Court Guard squads, taking over Old Man Yamamoto's place and all of that stuff. And there's a very ominous note of, hey, now we may be separated forever. Dun 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 dun. Right? At this point the opening, Scar by Tatsuya Kitani plays. I have really come around on this opening. The first few times I sort of heard it, I'm sort of like, alright, it's a Bleach opening, it's good, it's fine. But really, the more I've listened to it, the better it just seems to get. And when I say the better, this opening is great. I don't know what it is about it, but at this point, it's so amazing and good, right? After this, we go back to the all of the bath stuff with Tanjiro and Ichigo, right? Pretty much there's the whole thing to where we get the idea that, alright, Ichigo is done in the bath, and that he no longer needs his reishi and his spiritual pressure to be mixed around and dealt with anymore, right? He's fully himself again. And at this point we see that the way that Tanjiro judges this is by punching Ichigo, and being that Ichigo has withstood it, Ichigo is fine to move on, right? At this point, Renji gets up and says, hey, I'm going to go with him, and he withstands a punch too, even though it does look like Renji's in a lot worse shape than Ichigo is, right? Renji at least doesn't go flying like Ichigo did, right? At this point, pretty much, Ichigo and Renji start to go on their way, as we see Tanjiro talking with these two guys who are with him there, right? And he's like, oh man, that would have been bad if any of us stayed in there any longer. As we see that these two dudes who are with him, I don't remember their names, they're not important enough to remember, right? They have to wear these suits pretty much covered in spiritual pressure and reishi to be able to withstand the bath, being that the bath is so incredibly powerful, the white blood hell and the red blood hell, that pretty much they can't withstand it, and it would be healing them so much that they would die. Sort of equate this to Deku with the Eri backpack in the Chihai Psychic arc of My Hero Academia, right? It sort of, Deku was doing so much damage to his body, and Eri was healing him so fast, it would have sort of gone over It's a little bit of a weird thing there, being how Eri Rewind power works, but it's pretty much the same thing, right? They would have been so damaged. And we see that Tanjiro's hand is completely destroyed from when he punched Ichigo, because Ichigo had this gut instinct reflex that pretty much went back and broke Tanjiro's hand after Tanjiro tried to punch Ichigo, right? And at this point, Tanjiro says, yeah, that Ichigo kid has potential. I understand why the Soul King wanted him so much. Dun 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 dun. Right? At this point, we see that Shunsui now is taking over the captain duties. He's talking with the Central 46, right? He's making a bunch of notes, and of course, as we know, the Central 46 is pretty much a bunch of bureaucratic assholes, right? Not really people want to be dealing with, and we see that Shunsui doesn't really want to be dealing with them. He sort of makes a remark and be like, hey, can Ivan now be my lieutenant? She knows what she's doing. She knows how to handle me, right? And also he says that his first degree as head captain will be to teach Kenpachi Zaraki Zanjutsu, right? Zanjutsu is pretty much the using of a Zanpakuto. And as we know, he doesn't really have that, right? At this point, there's a bunch of arguments between all of the parties here, as they're all like, no, remember, we told the headman Yamamoto that he couldn't do that after so often. He can't do that. That'd be bad, right? And pretty much at this point, what's his name? Shunsui calls in Unohana, and he's like, Unohana, I will give this decree up to you. Dun, 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 dun. As he also calls her the first Kenpachi. Right? As you know, Kenpachi is a line. I think Zaraki is the 8th or 9th Kenpachi, right? Pretty much it's the title passed down, and the only way is to kill the other person. But oh no, Unohana is the first Kenpachi, and she's alive? What does this mean? And her name is Unohana Yachiru? Oh man, what's that girl that is the lieutenant of Squad 11 to Kenpachi? Oh, her name is Yachiru. Oh my gosh. Oh, revelations. Oh my gosh. If you can't tell, I think this is really stupid. Right, I'll get into it later, but this is another reason why I think this episode sort of falls flat a little bit, right? At this point, Renji and Ichigo are flying over to the, to the next area to see the next, person of Squad Zero, right? And while they're flying over, Kon appears, and there's a whole thing where they're like, oh, who's gonna land first? Pretty much we get there, and this is, oh geez, I wrote down her name, Kiriko Hikifune's area, right? It was the really big one, right? And pretty much we see that her whole thing is cooking. Pretty much to sum this up, she cooks food imbued with spiritual pressure to help pick people back up to be able to reuse their spiritual pressure to their fullest extent again, right? It's pretty much filling them back up and stuffing them up so they can have a max capacity of their own spiritual pressure to regain, right? Pretty much this is in order to, well, pretty much Tanjiro's whole thing was, all right, healing the body, and Kiriko's is pretty much healing the soul, right? That's pretty much the best way to look at this in a way. Right? Pretty much, she cooks food for Ichigo and Renji and Kon. They all eat up, right? Ichigo has sort of a really nice moment here of, should we really be doing this? Everybody else is going to risk their life trying to save everybody down there in the Soul Society. We're just here eating, and Renji pretty much says what Kiriko says as we see Kiriko walk back into the room. She's a new slimmed down version because, her cooking all of the food that she makes, she uses up a bunch of spiritual pressure, thus she loses weight as a part of that, right? And there's a whole funny thing of the Ichigo and Renji being like, wait, who are you? Oh my gosh, wacky funny stuff, right? At this point, Ichigo and Renji start to leave to go see the next person, and we understand that to get into Squad Zero, you have to make a contribution to the Soul Society, right? And that all 5 members of Squad Zero have made a great technological innovation that has gotten them to the squad, right? We understand that Kiriko's thing is that she helped create the Mod Soul, right? And the Gikon, right, which is pretty much some spiritual pressure imbuing stuff, right? But she was the one who created a temporary soul to go into a body, which made things like the Gigai and a mod soul a thing, right? She's the one responsible for all of this. And we learned that the next place they are going is to see a man named Oetsu Naima, right? And that his whole thing is that he created the Zanpakuto, right? And at this point, we cut over to what we have for the rest of the episode. But I have to say, as a manga reader of this, I cannot wait to see Oetsu in this series, right? It's really built up as, oh no, it's going to be a really scary, hard thing. What are you going to do meeting Oetsu, right? But in my opinion, the next part with Oetsu is probably one of my favorite parts of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. But we'll get to that whenever we get to it. Next, we have the whole thing where we know where Mukin is, right? Mukin is the, pretty much the place where Aizen is held, but Aizen's held in a really low level of it, right? But Mukin is the prison, right? And we see somebody walk into this prison, it's Kenpachi, right? And we see that Unohana's in there too. Pretty much to break all of this down, Unohana and Kenpachi are going to fight each other to get each other stronger, right? But as we will eventually learn, the whole thing is that Unohana is teaching Kenpachi how to use his Zanpakuto, right? And to break his limiters that he has put onto himself, right? Pretty much before we get all this explanation, the two of them bicker, right? And there's a whole thing where, oh, I looked up to you, right? And pretty much there's a whole thing where, oh no, both of them are criminals because they both killed hundreds of people. We learned that Unohana was in the first 13 Corps Guard squads, and that before Head Captain Yamamoto recruited her, she was the worst criminal the Soul Society had ever seen, right? There's sort of this little rivalry going on between Unohana and Kenpachi. Kenpachi has fought Unohana in the past, and in doing that, has greatly wounded her, right? And pretty much, it's really stupid where, oh no, one of these two has to die for the other to survive, right? Kenpachi ends up dying by Unohana's hands, and then Unohana saves Kenpachi with her healing keto stuff, right? And then, oh no, Kenpachi's flaw is that he's put limiters on himself, and the only way to get rid of these limiters is to not only kill Unohana, but have Unohana kill Kenpachi a lot of times first, so Kenpachi can remove these limiters, get stronger, and kill Unohana. Yeah, it's very convoluted. I don't really like this. I think it's very stupid. I thought it was stupid whenever I read it. This whole idea of, oh no, one of them has to die, and pretty much Unohana will be sacrificing herself so Kenpachi can get stronger, right? I personally think that this is as stupid as it can get, right? And this is one reason why I think this episode is so bad, is because of this right here, right? This is something that didn't need to exist, but does exist, and for some reason, because it exists, goes on to build up the plot into battles that aren't really that good later on, and this will make a lot more sense to people who are just listening to this after I do about this, but I just don't like this moment. We'll talk about it in the next episode. I really don't have much else to say. I sort of like the whole thing with Ichigo and Squad Zero more, and then just this Unohana Kenpachi stuff just ruins it at the end for me. Not a bad episode. It follows the source material perfectly. This is just a problem that I have with Bleach, not the adaptations going on here, because the adaptation's great, right? Then we get the title of the fall, symbolizing the fall from grace that Unohana and Kenpachi have had. We get the ending, Salahante by Senran, and that's really it to the episode. Like I said, time and time again, I have problems with this, not problems with the anime, problems with Bleach, right? With that, this has been episode... next episode is titled The Battle, being that there's going to be a battle between, guess who? Kenpachi and Unohana. Oh my goodness, right? So again, this is Bleach episode 9 of 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Episode title is The Fall, number 375 overall, and next time we'll be back for The Battle. This is Gold Plasma 231 out.